Dystopia Tonight. Dystopia Tonight.
I'm in New Jersey, so we've got this crazy ass storm that they've been, hyping up
Yeah.
for forever. And so literally I was just kind of like, yesterday I couldn't get ice. You know what I mean? You just prepare for all this stupid shit because I was like, I got the cooler, I got the thing. And then today I was running around all day, and for some reason in my head I had 8:30, which is just a really random, absurd, like it didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But I was like, no, 8:30. And it didn't occur to me to even double check like an ass. So I apologize.
Which part of New Jersey are you in?
I live now in Long Beach Island. So
yeah. We
and
spent a year there working
Oh,
on a record with at Kool and the Gang studio.
no way. Holy shit, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a blast to be that close to the city, and
Yeah.
of course we were there in the winter, and it snowed like hell that year.
Yeah. Oh, snow is such a faint concept now after the global warming shit. And you know what I mean? Like, isn't that weird that like when you said that, I was like, when was the last time we were supposed to this whole thing was supposed to be like a big fucking snowstorm, and then it slowly just became trash. Like it's just this unbelievable amount of rain and shit.
That's what we
have. Yeah. I grew up in Toms River, New Jersey. I don't know if you're familiar with that area.
Yeah, I do know that area. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
We explored New Jersey quite a bit when we were there because, on our days off, it was like, well, we might as well check this whole state out and drive around. So it's beautiful. It's actually so beautiful there.
It is, right? I feel like people kind of shit on it a little bit.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, it is because Nick's compared to the city, I suppose. I don't know.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, and there's not like, it's definitely, it's got a reputation.
Yeah,
I think ever since that reality TV show too, the Jersey Shore thing. I mean, people really. It took a long time to, I feel like, shake that vibe.
Yeah. Well, Portland has its problems with reputations too. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a favorite part of New Jersey while you were here? Was there anything that because I know we got the boardwalk, like there was some summer stuff. I know you were here during the winter.
The boardwalk was really fun. I remember that specifically really well. And, but it's funny because when you're working on an album, you're just in the studio for so many hours in a row. But, it's one of the weirdest things I remember, that being from Oregon, that I loved, was coming out of the studio at night. And the fireflies, I'd never seen those before, and they were spectacular. Wow. They were just all this huge lawn in front of the studio.
Yeah,
and it was all these gorgeous little green glowing things all over the lawn, and it was like, oh my God, we don't.
They just like what they heard. They were all lit up like little lighters,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they were like, what you guys just did in that studio. Yes, that's what we do here.
Yeah.
Did you get to go to Asbury? Because Asbury is like the Asbury Park is the.
Oh, you have to go there. Yeah. You have to go there. And of course, we spent a lot of time. We didn't have as much time as I would have liked, but we kind of hit everything briefly, and then went into the city whenever we could, just because that also was something we had toured and played, Madison Square Garden and stuff, but we had never. We never really spent much time in the village or anything of the fun spots there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Were there rumors of, like, when you were in Asbury back in the day? Because now every time anybody goes to, I performed in Asbury a million times, and I just opened for Jay Clemens actually.
Cool.
Yeah. And then, but were there, like, every time you go to Asbury, no matter who you're seeing, there are rumors that Springsteen might show up. It's like,
of course.
Was it like that back then?
Yeah,
too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, maybe he'll be there.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, I think he might.
I'm sure he just hangs around the park.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes I'm like, I think he might actually have shit to do. I think he's not gonna. Is there a reason? Anybody?
Yeah, he's just signing autographs in the park.
Right, exactly. Like, he lives under the stairs. We keep him here.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, I know, so obviously, I'm a huge fan of you and Rindy. I love, Quarterflash is a big deal too, but I have listened to your other stuff, and I love, like, everything else you've been doing and what you've been working on. So I would love to just kind of go through
Oh,
like
sure.
everything with you, if that's cool, like just the whole trajectory. And one thing I liked it because I'm not too familiar with your past and how you really got started in this. But what I'd love to know is from when you were a kid. Is there anybody else in your family who's musically oriented? Like,
No,
where did this come? No, okay,
no, that's interesting. I have on my wall a picture of my great, great, great grandfather in a band uniform. He had his own, brass marching kind of band in a city, a little tiny town in, I think it was North Dakota. And
okay,
that's the only person in my whole family that was interested or involved in music.
wow,
So it's kind of now Rindy's family was very different. Her family was quite musical, and her father was a phenomenal sax player. In fact, that's how Rindy got into the sax, was that it was laying around the house.
oh wow,
And she had been playing guitar up to that point. She's a quite good guitar player,
sweet.
but it was just too many guitars on stage. And she said, you know what, I'm going to pick up my dad's sax and see if we can make that work it into the band. And it was just sort of a serendipity thing. But she was used to hearing him play. He was a really great player and good harmonica player too. And so,
Nice.
and all of her family sings and hears harmony and sang in church and stuff. So she had that. Well, she always had an incredible ear. When I first met her in high school, I was literally tone deaf. I mean, for me, I was a kid who saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan like so many other kids and picked up a guitar and just banged away in my room by myself pretty much. And then when I met her, she was already doing like, sort of small folk gigs and stuff around town.
Wow.
And she was like 18. So, for me, it was like, whoa, just being around her was sort of like a quick lesson in how to become at least a beginning musician.
That's incredible. So she was more like, was she one of those types of people who could just pick up any instrument and kind of
Yes.
figure it out? Oh
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, she has that ear that I never had. I mean, that she can hear harmony parts instantly, and she just, yeah, she hears she can hear 'em. I swear to God, she can hear some really intricate melody, like
Yeah.
like a theme song to some movie or something that the first time she hears it, at the end of the movie, she'll come back, "I love that melody," and she will sing, like, half the melody perfectly, and I go, "How the hell do you do that?" And I don't have that. I don't have my we were very different in that regard. Everything for me musically, everything was a struggle. I had to really, it didn't come to me naturally. I just loved it so much that I stuck with it. What I
Right.
had that was my gift was that I was, from a very early age, I was a writer. My parents really encouraged me writing short stories and little poems and stuff they'd stick on the refrigerator. And I was in the grade school. I was writing for their little newspaper. And then in high school, I was the managing editor of the paper, and I was
Wow.
an English major. So words for me and lyrics were always the thing that came easy, and the music for me was always really. I had to really fight to get to a point where I felt like I was confident.
Yeah, that's a match made in heaven, though. You can't ask for anything better than
Yeah,
that.
it was, and I think we've often joked about how the two of us together make one good musician.
Is it when it was a struggle for you to do things musically, were you ever super frustrated by it? Where you thought like maybe or did the writing kind of for you did you figure out that writing was where you should be? Maybe even in the group with or, in collaboration with Rindy or even for yourself? Or did you really hit the wall a couple times trying to be like, why can't I get this?
Well, writing was almost sort of like writing was sort of my one thing that I could do well. And so
Mhm.
when I was playing with Rindy, it was kind of like just like I mentioned, she was a good guitar player.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there playing backup guitar to her, and I'm not really that great of a lead guitar player. I'm okay. I can do it. I can accompany her, obviously, but I felt like I wasn't, contributing enough, I guess I should say. And the other thing was
Okay.
that I was heavily influenced. My favorite acts records that I bought as a kid were all songwriters. I was just naturally. My mother used to listen to a lot of music, and so there
Mhm.
was like Frank Sinatra records. They're really
Okay.
cleverly, beautifully written lyrics, and I was really
Yeah.
into how classy and how clever they were. Very clever writing in that era. And so that I just naturally gravitated to that. And when it was sort of like at a certain point with fairly early on, maybe our first or second year. By the end of the second year, I started introducing our material into our little set because we started as a duet, an acoustic duet. That's how we
Hmm.
started. We had our first gig right out of high school, and then all the way through college, we played acoustic music. And the first band we were in was interesting because it was a college band that was already established, kind of like the New Christy Minstrels or something like that, you
Okay.
know? Yeah, folk band, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, and they covered all the classic folk music genres, that everything from Lead Belly to,
Oh,
John Denver, something like that. And that was a great, like, going to school for me to learn those songs. But the other great
yeah.
thing was that they didn't have any original material, and I started writing for the three singers in that band, and I wrote for all of them, including Rindy. And that was a huge opportunity for me to have my songs go out there and test them out in band situations. We played, college things and
Yeah, yeah.
occasional, all kinds of gigs that college
Yeah.
bands play, whatever you can get, kind of a thing. But they were also so really pro. So they had, rehearsals were definitely scheduled, and gigs were paid, and all that kind of stuff. So that was also a good lesson for both of us. We learned a lot from that band.
I want to follow up with one thing, but before I do that, I love that you mentioned I'm a huge John Denver fan.
Yeah, me
Like,
too. Yeah.
oh, that's so great to hear because I almost wore my John Denver T-shirt, by the way, and I don't know why. Like, literally, it's crazy. And then I was like, whatever, because because I feel like so. This is another thing too. So I don't know if you have a Spotify account. Do you listen to music on Spotify? Are you a fan of that or
No, I just it's funny because
Tangible?
yeah,
Yep, I'm this. I usually I have all still on my records. I have a bunch of records and stuff, and then
yeah.
CDs or whatever. But for Spotify, it gives you this playlist thing. It gives you it's called Spotify Wrapped at the end of every year,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
I listen to all new music too, and all this other stuff. But without fail, since they've started this thing where it tracks what you listen to,
Yeah.
it always get my number one on the top list is John Denver,
Oh,
and
that's great.
yeah, and it's the craziest shit because it makes me feel like I'm so out, but I'm like, no, it's like I just love John Denver. Like I guess I just listen to those albums, like
Yeah,
you know, and I
yeah.
think he's one of those guys that I don't think gets his due that
No, I
often. Like,
agree. Totally
what
agree.
is the deal? It's such a weird thing because like I feel like a lot of country or folk musicians and stuff like that, they'll mention other people here and there, and maybe they'll do like a John Denver cover, but like they never talk about the lyric, like the music and stuff that he had written and the his range too, like when he was
Oh,
vocal. Like it's
yeah.
weird. I don't get it. So
No, well, it's just it's a good question. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I never felt that way.
mm,
He really hit, hit the really where he was just everywhere for a while there in like 73, 74, 75, right in there. And I was teaching then before we became professional musicians. I was teaching in secondary education
right.
in Central Oregon, and all of my students, especially sort of young intellectual young women, loved John Denver. And so I used to, after school, I sort of hosted all the kids that were, before I went home, I would pull out my guitar, and all the kids that were interested in learning music or I had a record player in my classroom, and kids would bring in the records that they loved, and we would listen to them and we talk about them. And John Denver was huge. So I admired him too because I played his music, but I also, it was around these kids that I could tell it meant a lot to them.
That's awesome. That's great
Yeah.
to hear. Did you
Yeah.
ever meet him?
No, I never did meet him. I wish
Yeah.
I had. Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of those dudes that I was like, God, I wish he was still around. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah. Gone too soon.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where every time you see like a little thing or a blurb or a documentary, you're like, why wouldn't you put gas in the tank? Are you fucking you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
for the love of God, like, are you kidding me? Um, yeah, but it really just drives me crazy.
Yeah, that is
Yeah,
a sad, strange story.
yeah, definitely. The other thing I was going to ask you is when you were talking about, how you came into, you wrote some songs for people and that's where you really hit your stride. How do you approach it? Do you have to hear, the music or see the music that somebody else has written first? Or do you already have lyrics in your head and then you kind of, or something happens to you and you've already written it? Like, what do you need first? Do you need the music first or do you write lyrics first?
Well, what I'm looking for when I sit down with my guitar, and I play in odd tunings, so I play in, all my life since I was in college. I started tuning my guitar in weird ways. I was experimenting constantly. I was really influenced by Joni Mitchell and Stephen Stills and people like that were tuning their guitars in the early 70s in odd ways. And I got into that big time, and I started making, all these. I had a notebook full of tunings, and I was what I would think I was doing psychologically was I was searching on guitar, not because all of a sudden all the standard chords that we all, have played a million times in standard tuning, that's all thrown out. So wherever you put your hands, there's sort of a serendipity quality to it. It's sort of like if you don't know how to play the piano and you sit down, you try to write a song on the piano, you have no idea how to play the piano. It's kind of like that. It sort of frees up your head in an interesting way, at least mine.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so that's typically where I would start. I would start, pick up a guitar, and then try to find something that just who knows why, but psychologically it would grab me and go, "That's a cool little piece," whatever it
Okay.
is. Like on "Harden My Heart," it's that opening sax riff. I was
Yeah.
playing on the guitar and da 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 da. I hit that because I had I was in G tuning, and I hit that, and it's real easy to play in G tuning. In fact, it was going to be a guitar riff before it was a sax riff, and then
Wow.
Rindy played it on the sax. I went, well, no, I'm sorry. I'm throwing out the guitar riff. We're going to go with the sax riff because it was so undeniably huge sounding when she played
Yeah.
it. Yeah. But that's a perfect example of where I found this little thing. It's all it takes, sort of like a little doorway into something that I go, now that's worth exploring further. And then if I'm lucky, and happens, I would say maybe 40% of the time, maybe 35% of the time, as I start to explore where the melody or where the next chords are going to fall into place, the words will just come at the same time. If they don't come at the same time, if I finish the whole musical idea, that if I get a verse melody, a chorus melody, maybe even a bridge melody, and I still don't have lyrics, I have learned through the years to persevere and make that happen, but it's always a lot harder. It seems
Mm.
like what I'm looking for is something musically that instills a particular emotion.
Yeah.
So the emotion might feel like I'm writing these chords and go, what does that feel like? What maybe it has a churchy quality, So maybe this would be some kind of a spiritual song, and I'll be thinking about it along those lines because I'm a very much a chord person. A series of chords will, to me, instill some kind of emotional thing, and then the verbal part of my brain hopefully will kick in and put words to that emotion in some way, and then you're looking for a phrase or word. I try to stay in this sort of subconscious state of mind where I don't try to um, I'm not judging what I'm doing. I'm just throwing
Yeah.
shit against the wall, and then something will stick. I think I sent you the link to that one tune. I won't sing
Yeah.
here anymore. And
I
that's
was.
that's a perfect example where I was writing this, and it just felt like this was something important, and I didn't know what it was, and I just kept sputtering things. And when that phrase popped out of my mouth, I went, "Oh my God, that's it." I mean, that's what I was looking for, but you
Wow.
don't know it until you hear it. It's one of those kind of
Sure.
things. Yeah. So that's how I generally work. I can work strictly from lyrics alone, and I have done that a fair amount. But I generally don't have the whole song. I generally just have maybe a line or a chorus or something, and then I find music to it later.
A lot of your stuff I think comes through that way because it is very like in the same way that like Hard My Heart when they stuff out, it puts you in the setting that I
Yeah.
think you want the people who are listening to be in almost immediately. So
Yeah.
you're like it makes you feel like, oh, okay, this is something different, and it's going to put me, every piece of music, everything you hear, kind of, especially people who are overly affected by music, where their
Yeah.
emotions literally change immediately. Your music does reflect that, I think,
Well, thank
pretty,
you.
yeah, like accurately within people because it is when you're listening to something and the stuff you had sent me even stuff I'd never heard before when I'm listening to it, I was like immediately like, oh, this is the mood I'm in.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
setting he probably is making you think of. So it's actually really amazing to be able to do that, and it's cool that you kind of like have that in mind when you're making it.
Yeah, I think the best artists, my heroes as writers, when you hear them in the first, you know, 10 seconds, you're in a new universe,
Hmm.
and they've created the universe, and they know something you don't know. They have some kind of
Right.
knowledge that you don't have. They have some kind of secret or some kind of wisdom, I guess maybe is another way to put it, or a story that you want to hear. And somehow they are be able to create uh, that music creates that universe in your head that you want to go into. And that's
Yeah.
all, those are my heroes, is that they, in the first 10, 12 seconds, you're going, I'm in,
Yeah, me too.
I want to go for
And,
that ride.
and it's crazy because there's a balance of being those songs and those lyrics being extremely familiar, but also teaching you something at the same time. So you're like, I've been in this place that they're coming from before, but then they have a certain wisdom to it where you're like, oh my God, I didn't think of this way. It's funny because there's people who, and I don't have anything against, like, I love pop music too, the same way not pop, but you know what I mean? Like some of
Mhm.
the more, whatever, in the same way that sometimes you just want a McDonald's burger. You know what I mean? Like, you're not
Yeah.
and I'm not even saying it's bad. I'm just saying like that is a particular, but like
Yeah.
the majority of the time, I have to acknowledge sometimes when I'm with people in the car, when I'm driving somewhere, that not everybody really wants to think and feel while they're
Yeah.
listening. But I
Yeah.
like, if I'm by myself, like that, I'm like, take me on a fucking journey. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, take me
Yeah.
through this because, you know, I think it teaches you so much about yourself too. Like, there's definitely like, I can chart almost like a time capsule of like albums or CDs or stuff like that I was going through, like certain emotions or certain things in my life where it helped you grow.
Yeah.
It's-
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's I think invaluable.
Yeah. People, that's not something when I teach songwriting workshops, I try to tell people that there's no one way to do anything, of course, but also that there's so many ways that people listen to music. It isn't just the way I listen to music. I mean, I have friends who the only reason they put a CD on their car is because they want to get jacked up. I mean, they literally want to crank it up, and
Yep.
they want to get the adrenaline going. Every once in a while I do that, but that's
Yeah.
not really my way of listening to music. And other people, just use it for dance. I mean, literally, they just like,
Yeah.
I'm looking for the absolute crushing groove that I
Right.
can move my ass to, and I go, obviously that's perfectly legitimate. It's
Yeah.
not
Sure.
what I do too often,
Right.
but I get it, and so that's, it's a wonderful thing about writing songs is you can just write for so many different people, for what people want, and it may
Yeah.
not be, it doesn't have to be the same thing each time.
One of the things I love, and I don't know if you've noticed this happens, but it's when those people who just want to dance and, like you said, get their ass moving or whatever, will literally take a song like "Fast Car" by Macy, or you know what I mean,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then or not by, but literally will make it into a dance song,
sure.
and then you're just like, couldn't you just like I can't separate that. I can't dance to that. It's insane.
It's funny. It's like great when they remake a classic film, like a Hitchcock film or something like that.
Mhm.
It's like you're just asking. I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
there will be a new audience that will love it, or like the remaking of The Magnificent Seven, which is my favorite Western of all time,
love that movie. Yeah.
the original. But you watch the remake, and
Oh
I
no,
go,
no, the original. Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, the remake is just. Why
God,
did you even try to do
I know
that?
exactly. Like doesn't
Yeah.
have the. It's just ridiculous. I don't know why they touch that kind of stuff. Like I hope they never. I heard somebody whispering about redoing Butch Cassidy and the Sun. I was like, leave it alone. Robert
Yeah, right.
Redford, Paul. Are you kidding me? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
It's
like just
iconic. Iconic. You can't do
yeah.
it. Yeah.
You don't need to touch that. And who's gonna do like that's yeah. I feel you. How do you feel about like the current kind of reinvigoration of synth music? Like, and even kind of, I don't know if do you watch Stranger Things?
Yeah. Oh,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Me too. I love that too. Did you, oh, you're gonna have to spill the beans, by the way, if you tell me that Hard My Heart's gonna be in the last season of that, because
Oh, no, I don't think it
okay,
is.
I was like,
I would probably, well, actually, it's funny, John, because I never know what my music is being
mm,
used for until
really?
ASCAP sends me, or Warner Brothers or whatever sends me a check, and then I find out. It's always amazing because I go, there was a rumor that Hard My Heart was going to be used in a Broadway musical.
Wow.
And I got that rumor from a friend. Said I heard that was going to happen. So I called my publishing company because I thought, well, if anybody would know, they would know.
Yeah.
And they never returned my call. And then it ended up being in Rock of Ages, which was
Oh yeah.
which completely my royalties just sort of all of a sudden became like I was 1984 again.
Wow.
But it was sort of like, it's funny how they don't really tell you. A good publisher will go out and try and shop your music, and but they're not obligated, and they don't tell you what it's going to be used for. But eventually you do find that through your royalty checks, and that can be also a fun surprise to open
Yeah.
up your royalty check. But yeah, you don't know. No
Yeah.
one tells you. So it's kind of a strange situation, but it's okay.
Yeah, that's crazy that you don't get approval of what it could be used for. I guess
No, I don't. I had I had the option to take back my copyright, but it would mean at that point that I'm working my own catalog,
gotcha.
and that's a pain in the ass. I would have to
Yeah.
hire again. I would have to hire another, song plugger, publisher kind of a situation, and I
Sure.
already have one, and Warner Brothers has done really good for me, so I can't complain about it.
Are you allowed to make suggestions? Like, are you allowed, like,
No.
if you wanted, oh, you can't. Wow. Okay.
No, I don't. If and I'm not sure if being political is appropriate here, but if Donald
You can
Trump
do whatever
said
you want.
if Donald Trump said he wanted to use "Pardon My Heart" for a thing, I would definitely make an effort.
Oh,
Um,
damn.
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
but other than that, no, it's never been used for advertising. My music doesn't work for that. It's too dark and minor keyed, and it's not really oriented towards happy-go-lucky selling a product kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about that. Not that I would probably care one way or the other, but it's never been an issue.
Yeah, yeah, the Stranger Things thing is like that was basically I think the last season they did this reworking, I think with Steve Perry,
Oh
of that
yes.
one song, which I can't, like that I think is so fucking cool. Like I don't want anybody else singing. Like
Well,
there's a couple
yeah,
covers I enjoy like that. I'm like, oh, this person did a really, because you can tell they really,
yeah.
some covers you can tell they really like loved the music and they
Running up
just
the hill. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. But Running Up the Hill was great too. Like that she
yeah.
loaded because of that too. But
I love that album when it came out, and it was amazing to
yeah,
hear that song, and then watch it. It was fun to watch it go because
I know.
that album was, it wasn't a big smash album or anything for her,
Right now.
but I love that record, and I remember playing it in my car for months, and
Yeah.
that song was my favorite song on that record. So it was
Same.
for me as a songwriter. I go, that's really cool for her. I mean, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was really cool. That was kinda awesome, and then she got
That
the
synth music though is really, it's funny because I have friends who are really, see, I got into synths on a very, just for songwriting purposes.
Mhm.
I had a bevy of synths, and we used them
Yeah.
in the third album especially. We didn't use them that much the rest of the time, but it was when I heard that Things theme, I dug it. I completely dug it. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's so funny." It's almost like that's almost a parody of that whole era.
Yeah.
But I have friends who are really into synthesizer music. In fact, bandmates that they went, "Oh, that's horrible. That's not how they could do." So that they didn't get the retro inside joke on it that it's so old it's new kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah, it's funny because there's a lot of these, other bands and stuff like that that have kinda popped up, and they, you know, maybe I'm sure you guys would probably be able to tell the difference, but sometimes I'm listening to some of the and it's like, I'm like, "Oh, is this old or new?" You know what I mean? Because they just do that synth stuff. They're just
Yeah.
such tributes to the '80s. Like, The Midnight is one of those bands that I don't know if you've ever heard them before, but
No, I don't know the.
they dove directly into, and they have these crazy, like, it's almost like I think their whole appreciation for that kind of thing is like they grew up watching movies where they would have a guy in the '80s driving down the Los Angeles,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever, and there's this cool music playing in the background, so a lot of
yeah.
that has that feel, and it's just
It
I
does.
yeah, I like it. It's
Yeah,
cool to have it come back in that kind of way.
yeah.
Just to go back a little bit, you quit
Sure.
teaching in 1977, um, and when you quit, like, was that something that you're? Because I'm always interested in how people's families felt
Yeah.
about, you know what I mean? Like, you had a
Yeah.
stable job, you were a teacher, whatever. 1977, you quit to do Seafood Mama was the band, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, how does your family react to it, and how does that affect you? Or did anybody care,
Oh,
or were
yeah,
you
they
like,
cared. Yeah, yeah, I think more Rindy's parents than mine,
oh, okay,
because we had good teaching jobs. we were in a town that was actually a really fun town, Bend, Oregon. It's a ski town. It's a sort of where a place a lot of beautiful scenery. The Olympic people train there and stuff. It's really a youth oriented place. When we were there, it was more, counterculture was just starting to take hold. There was still kind of a little bit of a cowboy town, but it was a good place to live, and it's a beautiful spot, and the jobs were good. We had good teaching jobs. We liked our administrations, and so it was hard to leave. But Rindy's parents in particular just went, "Are you out of your minds?" And my parents were kind of, I think they probably felt the same way, but they weren't quite as vocal about it.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. I think, I'm always kind of interested in that kind of thing because I think like now when people go to do stuff, people's parents are maybe slightly more involved than they might have been in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And I always wonder what that would be, you know, like to not have anybody give a shit where you were.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, I think
like
in our generation, I think parents were more, it was just more typical that you left the house. You left the house. You didn't come back
yeah,
and live in the basement for the next 5 years. I
right,
think
right.
that I think that has changed in our culture because it's a lot harder for young
Yeah,
people to go out and make a living. Back then, my dad was a union guy, and so I worked union jobs growing up until I got into college, and so
nice.
I was lucky. But those kind of jobs, a union job paid really well. I mean, I worked for the
Right.
gas company before I was a teacher, and I was like going, "Gee, do I need to teach? I could learn to weld. I could be making,
Yeah.
I could be making $10 an hour." You know,
The dream.
the dream.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, it was a different world then, and I think it's a lot harder for kids now.
Oh man, that's crazy that you could have been making $10 an hour back then, and it's only raised to 15, I think, in this state like this year.
Well,
So
it's interesting too. Is like musicians. I have young students who teach songwriting too, and some of them are high school, some college age, and
mhm.
it's so it's depressing to me that we made more in Seafood Mama than they can make now, and that was 50
Yeah,
years ago. So like Rindy and I, Seafood Mama was Portland's probably biggest drawing band before,
wow.
even before Harden My Heart that we did,
Right.
and we made enough money playing in that band to buy a house in Portland, Oregon. I mean, it wasn't a mansion or anything, but
Right.
the idea that somebody could play in the bars now in Portland, Oregon, and then their earnings could allow them to buy a home, it's not
Hmm.
possible. It's not even feasible.
Nope. Even
And
as a comedian, it is it's in the last couple years, which is just plays to my ignorance. I literally thought the pandemic was going to hoping anyway, it was going to
yeah,
kind of shift how the industry business. I did have some kind of negative skepticism of being like, yeah, I bet you any amount of money businesses will find a way to screw us even worse somehow at the end of this, instead of being like, oh,
yeah,
we don't have, you like, for musicians and comedians especially, but like, you can't call your building a comedy club without comedians in it. So I really thought that was going to take effect when
yeah,
those businesses were closing down. I'm like, yeah, it's just a room that you bought and rented, like
right.
without the entertainment. But it's taken a weird hit, and now it's even gotten to the point where, and I don't know, I have to talk to, I think my music friends are also kind of going through this in a different way, but like um now agents, managers, executives, instead of finding somebody with talent and being like, hey, we're going to grow with you, we believe in your ability, you just need some backing, they'll just be like, why don't you have an audience already? and
Yeah,
then and then you're
yeah,
like, yeah, but and then it's like, what is your job again? You know what I mean? Like, if
yes,
I already
yeah,
have the audience, what do I need you for? So it's that constant, and
yeah,
it's a bummer because I've had so many different representatives who like, and they all want you to do. I just had a conversation with somebody who was representing me for a bit, and I wound up saying something I didn't really ever think. I was like, please don't use me as a resource. And they were like, what do you mean? I'm like, I said a lot of stuff that they were sending me out for at the time. This was new management to me.
uh-huh.
So I wound up leaving, but I like, I had to just kind of make it clear that like, hey, I feel like you're doing certain things with me because I'm have the ability to do them, and I
Mm.
feel like it's paying your mortgage.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
let's go beyond that. And I think it created this immediate one, standing up for myself created a rift, but two, like that's just not what they wanted to be. They want to just kick their feet up. And not that
yeah,
I get it, but
yeah.
like I feel like there's so much, I don't know. It's a weird thing to believe in yourself. Well, isn't
It
it?
is.
It's
It
insane.
is.
It really is.
Yeah, it's really hard to. I mean, when we left the label world from LA and went back to Portland, and we had to recreate. Obviously, it had been a decade, so we weren't going to go back to Seafood Mama or something and figure out what we were going to do. And
Right.
it was all of a sudden not having management, not having a label, and everything. I had to decide, if I'm going to dive into this, I'm going to have to be my own promotion team here, and it's just really, really hard to promote yourself as an artist, whether you're a
Yeah.
comedian, a painter, whatever it is, whatever art you do. The capitalistic system is not real friendly to self-starters and small businesses and just the psychological difficulty of saying dig me
Yeah.
constantly, dig me, buy me, dig me, buy me.
Yep.
You just begin to feel after a while like you're going, do you guys all hate me out there? I don't know,
Yeah.
because are you sick of me? Because that's what I'm feeling. I'm sick of me,
Yes. Oh
and
my God. I 100% agree. And now even more with like the social media stuff where like
yeah,
I'll have people advising me like you got to put out more videos and it's just you talking and like cuz I love doing this. I love talking to other people and I love my stand. I love being, as soon as I get there, it's fun. And then everything else that they want you to do in between to like build your brand or like whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
And also the quote unquote building the brand thing sucks the fucking life out of you because the stuff that you find just because it's unique to you, people are like, like you got to always wear this thing now and it makes you hate. Not that I like what I wear. I pretty much wear whatever I want. It's not like that, but like it is very much like, they try to design you in a different way and I kind of wish they would do it, but do it quietly. Like, don't like, because then it gets in my head and it's makes you feel like, you're not a person. It's fucking weird. It's just a
It
weird.
is weird. It's very difficult, and I sympathize with anybody that has to do that. But it's sort of where we are.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of management type support out there. Because it's the odds, I think, are even crazier than they used to be,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
they were always horrible. I remember when I was like, let's see, I would have been. This was just beginning of Seafood Mama, so I would have been, mid-20s or something. And I was
Mhm.
trying, and I was getting tired of playing in the bars already. And I was going, we should take a shot at trying to get a record deal. And I was looking for. It's funny because back then, now with the internet, we just assume, God, there's 1,000 things on how to, make your business better or
Yeah.
how to be a successful musician. 50 things you can do. Back then,
Right.
the resources for somebody living in a town like Bend, Oregon, or something, they didn't exist. So I went to the library and I went through. There was a giant tome called "This Business of Music," which is all legalese that I bought, which was a total waste of time. But I bought it. I just thought, well, I got to learn about this shit.
Yeah.
And then I bought two books. One was The Star Making Machinery, which was about John Boylan, who ended up being
Oh,
our producer. So weird. This is like 10 years before I met him, but it was
wow.
about him. It was a book about the beginning of how to make it. He was trying to revive. Um, Gosh, I can't think of who the band was right now, but he was a band that had success, then lost popularity, and he was trying to bring them back so it's all the making of one album from beginning to end. It's a brilliant
Wow.
little book of how the music business doesn't work or does work. And it was Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen. That was the
Okay.
band. That's what the whole book is about. Them making an album that was supposed to be their comeback album, and it didn't happen, and why it didn't
Wow.
happen. And then the other book I read was by all people was Kenny Rogers, was how to be successful in the music business. And
Awesome.
I'll never forget the very first chapter of the book said, if you're thinking of investing money in a musical career, you would have better odds of going down to Vegas and laying it on a blackjack table. He said, "That's
Oh,
just
wow.
that I just wanted." That's how the book started. I mean, so
Yeah.
yeah, which was actually a great thing to read because it gave you a sense of perspective of like, because people like myself in that generation, everybody was trying to be in a band, everybody was trying to do
Yeah.
stuff, and you're the I think not only did it give me a sense of like, let's face it, the odds are really small that you're going to get a record deal. But it also, once we got a record deal, I think, the idea that this is going to last forever was also something that, I think one, we weren't kids. We were, we were
Sure.
already 30 by then. So there was no big, it wasn't like, oh my God, my life is ruined. I'm going to go take heroin now. It was sort of like I had a perspective of it. And a little bit of that Kenny Rogers thing stuck in my head is like, well, for anybody, the odds are infinitesimal.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's weird because when you're young and you read a line like that and you still want to do it, that's kind of how you're like hooked
Yeah,
on
that's
you
true.
know, because we had a guy come talk to us when I was a young comic that somebody else knew, and there was a bunch of us like in the back of a club or whatever, and I'm still friends with him to this day. It went from literally me, after he got done speaking to us, giving him my first tape on VHS, being like, can you watch my stand, let me know what you think, and then to him kind of always following my career, and then a little bit of mentorship, and then now we're two old women talking on the phone every day. It's like, no, what are you eating? What are you eating? Or like when we're on the road or whatever. But he had come in to talk to everybody, and he was just like, hey, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. If you don't like being on the road longer than you're perform, and like unpacking and packing the same clothes every day, and out of bags, and living in hotels and yada yada, but everything he said that, like, and I was 20, so I was like, yes, all of that, everything you just said, I would like to be doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, then there's something wrong with you.
Well, you're an artist at that point. It's like
Yeah.
you go, because you look around and all the people that that didn't do that, and there's a ton of
Yeah.
them, or didn't take what I would call there's sort of a leap of faith, I think, that you make, that you go, you know what, we're going to go for it. And I remember coming back from a gig with Rindy and I in Seafood Mama, and it was a bar that was horrendously smoky, and it was a painful night, and we didn't get they didn't pay us. There was no guarantee. What they did is they gave you a beer pitcher, empty beer pitcher, and you, on your break, went around and begged the audience to put something in the beer pitcher for you. And I remember coming home from that gig and saying to Rudy, I said, you know what, I'm going to go loan some money from my dad, and I'm going to put a studio in our basement, and I'm going to see if we can make a record that is going to get us a deal, because I can't do this anymore. I can't do this very much longer. It was sort of like I'd reached a point where I felt, actually, after being a teacher and having sort of a successful career in education, and then all of a sudden I'm passing a beer pitcher around trying to get, trying to get $50 if I'm lucky, So it was sort of like, okay, now's the time to take that leap of faith. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But I just,
Right.
I could see that the bar scene for me and for Randy too, both of us, we just, it's okay for about 10 years. And then it just eats you up,
Yeah, there is something about not moving. I look at some people, and not to even disparage anybody, but like when I see some people I know have been doing it for a while, and I feel like I always wonder how or what. Like, I'm like, because I personally know, if there wasn't landmarks or things I was progressing in, like, and then stuff takes time too. So like, you could, there's some stuff where you go like, okay, I can see little tweaks and I'm still growing or whatever. But like, if something's not working, or if I'm not improving year by year or whatever the hell it is, then I would have to, like, even now, like, I think, like, with everything that's happening and going on sometimes, I mean, it's funny, like, people ask, like, your friends who are not in this business will always be like, I admire your passion, and I know you and it's like, I think about quitting every day. Like, there's like I literally think about, I'll just bag groceries and wait until I die, because there are moments where you do have to, like you did when you beg the audience for a thing. And even like my friend and I, we go on the road together all the time, and she'll like open for me, and we have a blast together. We like traveling with each other. It's great. But we'll literally get into some of these situations where we'll be like, how long do you have to be doing this before this doesn't fucking happen? And it just blows our minds. And we're like, what are
Yeah.
we? But then that time on stage is the best, and then you forget about it like an Alzheimer's patient, where you're just like, what are we just complaining about?
Yeah.
So that it was interesting that you said, though, because you were talking about the Seafood Mama and stuff. So Seafood Mama, you wrote "Harden My Heart" and you
Yeah.
were performing that, and then in 79, you signed with Geffen Records.
Correct.
A couple questions.
Sure.
So how did you know that "Harden My Heart" was your top hit?
Yeah.
And did it change from Seafood Mama to Quarterflash? And did you know that this was going to be like, is it like, did you know that this was your baby, that was the one you were pushing forward? Because some people make an album and they go, the one that they winds up hitting with the audience or with the listeners is not the one they expected. They had a favorite song,
Yeah.
that they were
Yeah.
putting out, and
Yeah.
but then the other one made it. Was it like that for you? Like, what was the trajectory between that and Geffen and,
Well, yeah, it's a complex almost 4 years between writing "Harden My Heart" and then it coming out a second time.
Yeah.
Because the Seafood Mama was the one we recorded in our basement, obviously, and so
Mhm.
we had management by that time. We just gotten management, and it. I had been recording in the basement for a full year before I wrote that, and in that year, I learned how to write for
Okay.
tape. I was writing for bars before that, and I got very good at it. And they were almost all sort of, I would call them almost novelty tunes. They had a catchy lyrics. They were simple, and they were kind of almost sing along. Our most popular song was a silly song called "Hold the Mayo." Believe it or not, it was about a waitress and a cook who had a love affair, and it was a comedy bit. It was very
That's
much
great.
like it was much more like Dan. It was very Dan Hicks, I would describe it.
Okay.
And people loved it. It was people just we could not play it enough, and da 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 da. It's a great dance tune as well. Well, that when we tried to record, and I had a number of those. I had probably half a dozen songs that were sort of in that vein, and we tried to record them, thinking, well, maybe we can go in that direction, like a female Dan Hicks kind of thing with Rudy playing the sax. And we had a swing violinist in that band,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't work. It just did. You could tell immediately. You listen to it on the tape, you go, that sucks.
Wow.
So then I had to shift and go, okay, well, what can we do? And then I started experimenting, and I had been listening at that time. I kind of got turned on to what eventually sort of became known as new wave, which was Elvis Costello and people like that were starting to happen. And I was listening to that stuff, and so I started writing in that vein, which was more, I guess you'd call it sort of pop, alternative pop, a little bit of that kind of a quality. And then I wrote a number of songs. The first one was Valerie. I don't know if you remember that song. That was on the first Quarterflash album.
Yeah, I love that song.
Which was about a gay relationship, a lesbian relationship in college. And we played that and recorded that. And that was the first thing that we went, now that sounds good. In a different, that was very, Graham Parker, Costello kind of sounding.
Yeah. I love Graham Parker, by the way.
No, yeah, me too. Yeah. And so Gary Myrick too, those kind of guys were I was into it at the time. And and then that once I wrote "Harden My Heart" and when Renee laid the sax down, it was sort of this. It was an epiphany moment. I mean, it was sort of like my engineer guy, and we were in my basement, and she laid it and we played it back, and we just went, holy shit, that's something right there. And so I immediately called the manager and I said, I think we got something really good here. And so and then of course he took it immediately to the radio stations, which Portland radio hadn't supported a local band since Louie Louie. That was the last time a local band got serious airplay in Portland. And they jumped all over it, and it went to number one. Then it went to number one in Seattle and in Eugene, and so then we got signed. It took a while, but we got a Geffen rep to come up and see us in Portland on the strength of "Harden My Heart's" local success.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but Seafood Mama was really kind of an unusual band in that it was mostly a Western swing band. Like I said, that "Hold the Mayo" thing. It was It was kind of like if you imagine putting a drum kit behind Dan Hicks, It was kind of like that.
Okay.
That was its thrust. And so the players in that band, once we started going into like, okay, now I'm going towards Graham Parker and Elvis Costello, and a little Fleetwood Mac is in there, whatever. It all of a sudden it wasn't happening on stage. So it was just a sad situation. They were compensated very well. Some of them are still getting royalties from that record. Uh, and so it's all, it was tough for everybody, but it was more tough for them than us, obviously. But so we started that album, the first Quarterflash album, by ourselves. It was just Randy and I and LA studio musicians, which are given credit on the record, but they're not listed under what they played. But Boylan put together the band for me, and he knew the cats down there, and I didn't, obviously. So Boylan came up to Portland, and he said, "Here's the songs I love. What are the ones you love?" We hashed out the songs that would eventually be on the record, and then he said, "I'll find the musicians for this, and you can direct them," which is what I did. And so it was really great to work with, to go from not to take anything away from the Seafood Mountain Players, great people, and I still love them to death, but. This was a whole new level of performance with these cats. Like, I had Jackson Brown's bass player on some song. Michael Porcaro was the other bass player on that album. And, I had Little Feat's keyboard player, whose name escapes me right now. But drummer was Ronstadt's drummer at the time. And so, it was, it was a blast and kind of scary for me, intimidating, because I was, my experience with outside of my basement was very, very limited.
Yeah.
So that's how it developed. So we finished the first album pretty much with just studio musicians. But just before we finished that album, I happened to see Jack Charles' band, who ended up being in Quarterflash. I saw his band playing at a bar while we were in between sessions in LA. And he had written a song called Critical Times, which ended up on the first song. And I just absolutely floored me, that song. I just loved it. And Jack was a very accomplished musician. Had already had a record deal and lost it with trying to think, it was Andy Williams' label. But so he took that whole band, which was called Pilot, and turned it into, they joined Randy and I, and that's how, and we finished the album. We added Jack's song, Critical Times, and then I wrote one for Jack to sing, which was Cruising with the Deuce. And then so the album was released a little later than we thought it was going to be, but it was obviously we made the right choice to hold back and put Jack and those guys in the band.
Right.
So that is a long story short. Not that short.
No. So
sorry, it's a hard story to tell short.
Dude, I'm loving this kind of thing. This is right up my alley. So also from like 81 to 85, I feel like a lot of things kind of, took place for you guys. Like you were touring with Elton John, you were touring with Loverboy, Sammy Hagar. And then also in that span of time, you wrote for the movie Night Shift, the Ron Howard movie. Yeah. So if you can, like, okay. So Elton John you were touring with Elton John before Loverboy and Sammy Hagar, right?
No, Loverboy was the first major band we toured with, and that was we started that tour in the very end of 81, and it possibly went into a little bit of 82. It was freezing. It was a winter tour, and we did Montana, North Dakota.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. So that was very cold. And then we went, we did the Texas Stampede tour with Sammy. So we did a lot of Texas, but we did other states as well with Sammy in the very early spring, late winter of 82. Yeah. And then Elton was on the same label as us.
Okay.
He was on Geffen. And so he was planning his summer tour, and the Geffen people had our management teams talk to each other, and we had our album was starting to really go up the charts, and Elton was looking for somebody hot to take out and warm him up. So that's how that happened, and that was a very, very. I think that really turned our album into gold to platinum, was because it was 37 shows. We did his full North American tour, which was phenomenal experience to just to watch those cats. I mean, it was a reunion of his original 4-piece, and so Nigel and Dee, and Davey, and those guys were unbelievable players and so inspirational to hear all those songs night after night after night after night. And Elton was just the sweetest person. He and Rindy just really hit it off and
Oh,
hung around each other. And he'd come backstage a lot and talk to us. And he was totally entertaining. And he's just a great guy.
that's
I
very
mean,
cool to hear.
yeah, Loverboy was such a different experience than Sammy Hagar. There was sort of this testosterone, masculine shit
Yeah.
going on all the time. And they were never horrible to us, but there were times where it was like, are you kidding me? You're going to, do
Yeah.
that. Because we
I
were
was
the
gonna say there
warm-up
must have
band.
been clashes. Like, I could tell,
Well, it's just it's just
musically.
like not getting sound checks.
Sure.
They're supposed to be off the stage so we can get our gear on stage, and then they let their roadies jam on their own gear instead of they'd leave the stage. They let their roadies jam till 5 minutes before doors, and then they would leave the stage. We'd had 5 minutes, and we'd be setting up and sound checking while the people are coming into the room. So that kind of shit happens. It was sort of a thing that happened. It's almost like I don't know, rite of passage for hair bands in that era, to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
shit like that to the warm-up act. And you hear a million stories. We weren't alone in that respect.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that you
Well,
definitely
we
hear a
didn't get
lot.
that. Elton was great. He said, listen, the first week, first 7 shows or whatever it was, I think it was, he said, you guys get a full hour check. And we will do a full hour check. And then after we both get our sound together and our sound men have everything written down on the boards, then from there on, we're just going to come on for 15 minutes and do our sound check, and we expect you to do the same. So we knew, exactly what had to happen, and he didn't like to be on stage a long, long time before he played because his voice was already causing him problems then in that era, and
Oh, right.
he kind of shifted into that lower part of his voice, just starting that at that time. So he didn't want to do sound check for an hour, and then of course he didn't want this warm up act to do a sound check for an hour. So yeah, but he was very fair and very open, and yeah, that was a great tour.
Are you good at like are both like so do you guys still talk to like do you keep in touch with Elton?
No, for a while we did.
Okay.
Rindy did when he came back after the tour, that tour, and then years later he came to Portland and he contacted Rindy, and she went down and saw him backstage and stuff.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
but that was the last time. Yeah.
I'm fascinated by that kind of thing because I get, I've met a lot of, I've got to meet a lot of heroes and people that I've gotten to work with and comedically or whatever. And I was talking to Meg Kavanaugh about this. I don't know if she's the actress from League of Their Own.
Oh yeah.
And she was yeah, she does voiceover. But she and I became friendly, and we did it. She'd done the show during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and we were talking. She was talking about working with Mel Brooks when she did
Wow.
oh my god, Robin Hood Men in Tights and all
Oh
those guys.
yeah, yeah.
And Mel loved her because she kind of an improv background. She's fucking hilarious, all this other shit. And then I think he'd asked her to do something else, and he was always like, keep in touch, but she doesn't, she just has that awkward thing where she just didn't do it. And I was
Sure.
like, I am the same I don't fucking way. And I ask everybody, like, it's a weird thing when there's somebody, that you
Yeah.
respect and admire says
Yeah.
keep in touch. Your brain can't fathom, like, yeah, they just said that. Like a high school
Exactly.
yearbook, KIT,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then you
Yeah.
call and they're like,
Yeah.
what are you
Yeah.
calling me? But I do have this thing where like this is disbelief of like, people that I've met over a period of time who do check in and we text and it's fine. But I have to keep reminding myself. And I don't know if that's a neurotic thing that everybody has
I
or
think
if
we
it's
all
just
feel sure. I think it's a normal feeling of
yeah,
sort of like an insecurity thing. Like, who would
yeah,
want to talk to me?
yeah.
Yeah, the one person I have stayed in contact with, who I talk to fairly regularly, is John Boylan, who was our producer of our first
Nice.
2
That's awesome.
records. And Boylan was, he was the father, really the father of the LA sound. I mean,
Mhm.
he put the Eagles together for Ronstadt's backup band, and he has remained. And when Linda came to Portland recently, she did a speaking tour. She doesn't sing anymore, of course, but she did a tour, where she just sat on stage with John. And John held a computer which had these amazing photographs of her childhood and her whole life and everything.
Wow.
And he sort of interviews her, and then they and it's really, Linda's great. We toured with her tour, and
Oh, that's awesome.
then we went out to dinner afterwards. So I did get to, visit with Linda before she sort of
Oh,
has
that's so cool.
really retired now, of course.
Yeah.
But it's with John. John and I admire him so much. He was our mentor. He's 10 years older than me. And so
Mm.
when I started when the very first Quarterflash album, I was 30 and he was 40. And he was he's a really wonderful human being, but he's also a really incredibly smart, brilliant guy. And
Yeah.
his son goes to college here in Portland, so
Wow.
there's a connection there too with his son Johnny. So yeah, there, but most of the people that I've had a relationship or knew or whatever in that era, there's very few that we stayed in contact, but there's a few.
Yeah, it is good. What I'm saying is that you'll hear from me at Christmas probably. So don't be alarmed.
Oh, that'd be great.
Or if I'm ever in Oregon.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah. No, but yeah, so you were doing that, and then so how does something like a movie come along where you're actually writing for it? Is that through like John Boylan, or is that through contacts that you have met when you get to do something like that? Because Night Shift, that's another,
Yeah,
also
that was Ron Howard. Ron Howard loved
okay.
Ron Howard loved Quarterflash. So
Awesome.
and he loved Harden My Heart. So he called the label
Mhm.
and said, "This Ron Howard, I'm doing this film, and I love Quarterflash. I'd like to had them on part of the soundtrack and maybe do the theme song. But the problem is that Burt Bacharach has a solid contract to do all the original material for the movie. Would it be possible to hook up Quarterflash with Burt Bacharach?" And so we went to, which was an amazing experience. So Randy and I went to Burt Bacharach's home. He was married to Carol Bayer Sager at the time. The
Oh.
entire house was white. I'm not kidding. Every wall, every rug, every piece of furniture, everything was white. And he was
Wow.
dressed in white. So was she. I mean, it was like you almost had to put sunglasses on when you walked in. It was one of those experiences where you go, "Is this really happening to me?" First
Yeah,
of
yeah.
all, it's fucking Burt Bacharach, right? I'm sitting in
Right.
this living room with him, right?
Mhm.
Who is, as a songwriter, you just go, "Okay, this is the holy grail." It's like meeting McCartney and Lennon or something. So
Yeah.
I was very, uh, I was just sort of like, it was an out of body experience. And they said, "Well, we want to play you this song. We got it. We think we've got it." So they
Mhm.
took us into, this is a great story. So they take us into the music room, and the music room, because they're a songwriting couple now. She's writing lyrics, he's writing music, and they did some
Okay.
songs, and they wrote "That's What Friends Are For" together, which is a very
Yeah.
good song, right?
Mhm.
So anyway, but we walk into the room, and they say, "Have you seen the movie where the beginning of the movie? Because it's going to start with the song that we're going to do, and that maybe Quarterflash will do if you want to." And we said, "No, we hadn't seen it." So they had a TV in there, and they put on a videotape of the beginning, so we could see, okay, what's the mood of the beginning of the movie.
Right.
So as we're watching it, they sit down at matching Pac-Man machines. They're facing each other. Okay, she's playing Ms. Pac-Man. He's
Mhm.
playing Mr. Pac-Man. Okay, so I'm watching this movie, a Ron Howard movie. I'm thinking, okay, I've got to think about what is this music supposed to be in this movie. In the meanwhile, I'm hearing ding 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 ding, brr, 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 ding 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 ding, brr, brr, and it's friggin' Burt Bacharach and his wife playing Ms. Pac-Man and Mr. Pac-Man, looking at each other playing. This is just the most amazing story. So they finished playing. I was like, "Hey, I got an idea." It's kind of dark. I mean, the movie starts in the dark, at nighttime, and there's a body falls out of a building and lands in a
Mhm.
basketball hoop of all places.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of dark. So I'm thinking, okay,
Yeah.
it should be a minor key like "Harden My Heart." That makes sense. And Ron Howard
Mhm.
said he liked "Harden My Heart." So
Mhm.
they sit down at the piano, Bert's famous gray piano he's composed on since he was in college, legendary keyboard. And he sits down and he starts playing the song. And I'm going, "Man, this really sounds like "Harden My Heart," but he's got that Bacharach bounce. So it's doom, 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 it's a shuffle, but instead of dun 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 dun, it's more boom, dun, 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 dun. It's got that little lilt that he
Yeah,
always
yeah.
had. You know, Raindrops keep falling on
Yeah,
my.
yeah.
He always had that bounce in his music.
Yeah.
That was lovely. I mean, I'm not being an asshole
No,
about it.
no.
No, but
Yeah.
anyway, but then she sang the song, Carol, and Carol's
Mhm.
singing the song, and I'm going, because now I know the plot of the movie. I have
Yeah.
a basic idea. And I'm going, "Man, these lyrics are really odd. I don't understand what these lyrics are about. It doesn't sound like anything like what's going on in the movie or anything, because I know the basic plot."
Yeah.
And the lyrics were referring to Blinky and Inky and Winky. And I'm going, that's not the name. I knew the name of the characters in the movie. And I'm going, that doesn't sound right. What is that? And they finish it and I go, well, that sounds like kind of like we could make that into a Quarterflash tune,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure what do these lyrics mean? And Carol goes, well, those are the name of the characters in my Miss Pac-Man game. Those little guys that eat things,
Yep,
their names
the
are
ghost.
Winky, Blinky, and Inky or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm going, oh my God, what do I say? I mean, it's like, am I going to actually sit here and criticize this thing? And I couldn't. I couldn't
Right.
bring myself to do it. So I went back, and then I had a meeting with Marv, A&R person at Geffen, and I said, we can't do that song the way it's written. It's just, it's, Winky, Blinky, and Inky, following Harden My Heart. The song already is just a little bit getting close to too poppy for us.
Yeah.
And after Find Another Fool and Harden My Heart, and then on the Night Shift, kind of thing. And so, but I said we can kind of smooth that out. We can put it. Really can come up with a great sax line. We can make it into a straight shuffle, and not make it have the bounce in it. But those lyrics, I can't get around those lyrics. If you let me rewrite the lyrics, because I think for it to be a Quarterflash tune, I have to have some input. And Rennie I know what Rennie sings well, and they don't. And Burt was very cool about it. He was like, absolutely, yeah, no problem. That's great. You'll do it. But then Carol was his wife was not happy, and it, we didn't take the blow back as much as our A&R person did. Carol Childs, she had to handle. Luckily she was close friends with the two Carols were, friends, and so it all got ironed out. It didn't matter in the end. Obviously the big hit on it was What's What Friends Are For, was the big, thing that happened off that record, which ended up somebody else sang it and became a sort of an AIDS theme with Rod Stewart. There's somebody, I can't remember who, Elton, I think, sang one of the verses in it, perhaps.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, anyway, to make another really short idea, long story, sorry. But
No.
it's such a fascinating story, because when I tell people that, I have a hard time believing I went through that Randy and I sat there.
I'm still, Burt Bacharach and his wife playing Pac-Man is fucking hilarious. Like, I don't know how that's gold. That's hilarious.
I know, it is gold.
What a surreal. I mean, what are you supposed to like? And then I mean, I don't know if the whole time I'd be sitting there going, are they fucking with me? Like, I would not know what to. Like, is this normal, or how am I supposed to react? Or...
It's funny coming from Portland, Oregon, and really, Rennie and I both from middle class, working class families, and we grew up in, families, and we never had much money and stuff. And Portland really, in terms of style or anything like that you want to talk about, we're basically, backwoods compared to LA was at the time, and especially LA of the 80s, which was so fashion and hair and, everything was like that. So, it was almost everything that we ran into in LA felt like we were, and there's a line in the song Williams Avenue that's on the first album that sort of references that. I felt like a pigeon, in the being in a zoo. So here's a ordinary gray stupid pigeon, and then all these exotic animals around it. That's how I felt.
It's a great analogy.
Yeah.
What a great experience, though, just to have that. And Pac-Man's great, by the way. I just can't imagine anybody making a song. Like, I bought my mom a Miss Pac-Man arcade, like from One Up Arcade, because they're just coming out with all this 80s shit now. You know what I mean? From back in the day. So they literally have, and you can hang it on the wall if you want, but it's like yay big.
Oh my
and
God.
You can get the big one. You can get the real one. But there's one that's just, and at first I thought, I'm going to have to take this back to the store because there's no way it functions, but it's beautiful. And it works, but like I can't imagine. Like, I love that game. It's a great game. Maybe you had to beat them at the high score to get like control over. You know what I mean? Like maybe they wanted you to like jump in there, you and Rindy, and like,
oh my God,
ownership of this music.
The Record Plant, which we did the first two albums, that they had a little game room, and it was just it was a way to take a mental break from being in the studio for endless hours.
That's a good idea.
And they had a missile command in there, and that's what I got addicted to. Of course, you had to put money into it, so the studio was making money in another way.
Wow, that's so fucked up.
Yeah, and our engineer Paul Garup, who engineered the first two albums, he was addicted to Missile Command. He got me addicted to it, and so it was crazy. But
that's awesome.
It was fun. It was fun to sit there and play Missile Command and have Dolly Parton come in and play there, and have, for again a kid from Portland, Oregon, have, it was one of the funniest stories. A couple of funny stories from the Record Plant. One is that we're walking down the hall. We're in Studio B. Studio A is Rod Stewart, and he's got Ron Wood with him in that band, and they were doing the song that became eventually Young Turks.
Oh wow.
Song. And so they were in there recording, and Harden My Heart had hit big, and we were actually, it was the second album because Harden My Heart was already hit. And we're walking through the hallway, which is very narrow. So you pass somebody like that, you can't help but miss him. Rennie was obviously a beautiful young woman. They're walking by. And of course, I see Rod Stewart and Ron Wood are checking out Ren, of course. And I hear Ron say, just as we're passing, I hear Rod Stewart say to Ron, he goes, "Who's that bird?" And and Ron says, "I think that's the chick who plays the trumpet." And it's just that little moment of like, oh my God, that's so great.
That's amazing.
So great. Yeah.
Oh my God.
The other story I'll tell real quick is that
please.
in the record plant was Rod Stewart. He was just a character, but we had Giorgio Moroder in the other studio who was doing the new who's the guys that did YMCA? Village People.
Yeah, Village People.
He's doing the Village People, a new Village People album in the other studio. And Giorgio Moroder was from Europe, and he was huge there. I mean, he was as big as you can get. He had gigantic hits. And so the rule at the record plant was, because all these, Fleetwood Mac was in there, and all these bands. Randy Newman had his full orchestra in there. He was directing, stuff, and so it was quite a place. But the rule was in the parking lot is that it was only very few spaces in the parking lot, and it was first come first serve. It didn't matter who you were. If you got there first, it didn't care if Glenn Fry drove up in his Maserati. You didn't have to move your car if you got there first.
It's a good rule.
So Giorgio Moroder, though, he goes out. This is great. He has a custom-made safety cone, big orange cone with his name engraved like on plastic around it, and it says "Reserved for Giorgio Moroder." It puts that there overnight. So like, I'm different than the rest of the stars, So we're leaving the night before. We're leaving, and I see him. He puts it there. He drives off. He puts the cone there and drives. And and I'm thinking, I wonder how that's going to fly tomorrow morning when somebody else shows up. So I forget completely about it. We go into the record plant, and we're working in the studio. I got to take a whiz. I go into the restroom, and there in the urinal, it turns out Rod Stewart had done this. I didn't know till later, but he had taken Giorgio Moroder's safety cone and stuffed it into the urinal reserved for Giorgio Moroder. And I just went, that's so Rod Stewart. It's so good.
Fucking amazing. Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Oh my God. That's so great. I love those kind of stories with everybody's personalities sort of kind of you know what I mean? Like, and a brilliant idea to have a game room in there too. Cause like you said, who doesn't want to see, famous Dolly Parton play, Struggle at Galaga for a half, and you know what I mean? Like, the fuck is that? That's a great idea. I love that kind of stuff is amazing. There's a place in Red Bank, New Jersey called Yestercades. I don't know how, I don't remember when it opened, but I played Missile Command like literally recently because my friend and I, who I was telling you about that we toured together, we'll just go have dinner in Red Bank and then walk over to Yestercades, and it's all like vintage, like older, like, and it's 80s, some of the games there are nuts because it's like, who, like, you don't even understand, like, it was just truly like, those arcade games are fucking crazy. You are had to be on drugs to play it. There's one with a giant head, demon like thing that you just like, what is going on? But they're a blast to play. They're so much fun.
Yeah, Asteroids was in there too, of course.
Asteroids is a great game. Yeah, that's still a great game.
It is.
We played Frogger. There was a bunch.
Frogger. That's right.
What's the guy who serves beer? It's like the restaurant, which is hilarious because I wouldn't do that if you paid me now, in real life. But but like, I'm a tapper. I'm like trying to get everybody, I'm like, oh, that's so crazy, man. So do you have any place to be, by the way? I feel bad. I want to keep you forever.
No, I don't have.
Oh, cool. Okay, great. Cause we're just going through this. I'm just excited to talk to you, man. So, I know you've been making new music and I want to get into that as well, sure. But I don't want to miss anything cause in 91 you built the studio in Portland and you started Ross Productions, but I think I might be skipping over. I know some stuff. You toured with Starship and Night Ranger, which Night Ranger is great. Like, that's another. Starship and Night Ranger are just two of those bands that makes so much sense to me that if you told me you were going back on tour with them again, you know what I mean? Like if you guys are
Yeah.
going back out, I'd be like, yeah, no, totally. Because there is this resurgence, by the way, of like, which I don't know if it was, I don't know if it started pre-pandemic, and it just seems like
It was
but
pre-pandemic, yeah,
it
that's when we
was.
started getting the offers at that time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
it's been like this thing of like, um, legacy bands like you
yeah,
guys just
yeah,
kind of joining up and then
yeah,
going out on the road. Because I think I saw Tears for Fears live recently. I got to go,
yeah.
but I didn't realize at the time they had not toured for 15 years.
Well, yeah.
So I'm like, but it was this thing of like everybody's coming back out. So I don't know if you guys are planning on coming back out, but
No.
um,
In a word. No,
absolutely not.
we had the offers to do that, but, the thing for me, I've never, I mean, we always Quarterflash kept going. It changed personnel after 90, but,
Right.
it I we were always right up to the time we quit. I was writing new songs, and so it became a thing where, to me, and that's what kept me going. But
Sure.
the Harden My Heart thing was what kept us getting gigs.
Right.
But what kept me invested in it, and Randy too, was that we were felt like we were still writing. It's sort of like, Randy and I are on this journey that goes along like this, and for a brief, 5 years, the public's taste and ours intersected,
Okay.
and we just kept going, and the
Hmm.
public went over here somewhere, for in terms of our music being something that somebody thought they could make money out of.
Right.
But the music for us, for Randy and I, was always about the next song. What is the next thing we want to do? And that we never lost until when we retired, right up to we retired, we never got tired of finding another song that just worked, and just the
Sure.
excitement of making a song that works. So, going these bands, those kind of tours that you're just discussing, those you play 5, 6 songs sometimes. Sometimes
Mm.
maybe you play a whole set if you only have 3 bands, let's say. But
Right.
still, the audience is there for. We did one with Pat Benatar
Oh,
in LA, near LA, and it was a really interesting experience because it was kind of like us sticking our toe in the water. Like, would we like doing this? Do this kind
sure.
of a thing. So we went down to, I guess it was Riverside, I think, California. We did a show at a beautiful theater, and we were the warm-up act, of course. But the whole audience, it was really interesting because I was taking it very seriously, and I was going, okay, I've got these new songs too I want to put in there, and I was like, I
Yeah. Yeah.
want to show our new stuff. It's really cool. And I realized that before even played a note, that I was looking at the audience out there. And I'm going, they're not here for anything that's new. They're here. They're dressed up at 80s clothes. They're kind of drunk and they're having fun.
Right.
It's all about going back to high school for these people in this room right now,
Yeah.
and they want to hear all of Pat's tunes that are hits, and they want to hear all 4 or 5 hits that we had, and
Yeah.
that's it. That's really all it's about. There's nothing here that our cool new song is going to fit in at all. And so it's like when I saw McCartney play, and he played a couple new songs, and you can just see, you can feel the energy in the audience just drop.
Yep.
And then he goes back to the Beatles stuff. Oh, it's like this great thing,
Yeah.
And it's got to be hard for him, because obviously not for any kind of ego problem he would ever have, but just in terms of just like, hey, I'm still writing,
Yeah.
I'm still creating, and nobody wants to hear that because of this thing that happened 40, 50, 60 years
Sure.
ago. Yeah, so that was sort of like a test run, and we just went, that's not for us. We're going to do. We'll play in Portland, and when people come to see us, they see us on our terms, and we'll
Hmm.
play Hard My Heart. We'll play those tunes,
Yeah.
but we're also going to play our new tunes, and we're going to just kick ass and not worry. And we're going to play, what we want to play.
Yeah.
So that freedom of, doing that, I just didn't want to get in that. Plus, you might have to share a bus with a bunch of other 60-year-olds, which I can't think of would be that much fun.
You could just do what Dylan does, and everything you sing is completely inaudible,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
so that
The,
no one, you know.
the best thing about those events, and I think there's a positive aspect besides having fun for the audience,
Yeah.
and you have to approach it you have to approach it on their level. You can't approach
Sure.
it on your level. But the other good thing, I think, is that because you're all older, that when you go backstage with people who at one time were your contemporaries when you were in your 20s and 30s, when you had all that testosterone and it's a competitive market field. And a lot of times if you're a warm-up band versus the headliner, there's all that
Sure.
shit that goes on. It's just built into it,
Right.
That's all gone. And
Oh,
that's the best thing in the world. Like, Pat Benatar and Randy hugging backstage and laughing and just having a great time. That
yeah.
probably wouldn't happen. When we saw Linda Ronstadt and had dinner with her, it was the same thing. When we toured with Linda, she never came out of her dressing room to talk to us or anything. It was
Wow.
like she was just very focused, and that's fine. That's cool. But it was
Right.
just part of, you know what I mean? It's just part of the that whole dream making machinery kind of thing. It's all there was a competition element to it all the time that's just sort of
Sure.
underlying. Everybody pretends it's not there, but it's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That isn't even, nobody pretends when you get to be 60. Everybody's just going, wasn't that amazing that we all got to do that, and so that's something but backstage with Pat Benatar and her husband and stuff was the best part of that gig.
That's really nice to hear because I think the audience kind of hopes that that's the case. Like,
Yeah.
because we're so, we're such fans in general anyway, but you do hear like, you do hear about like little feuds and people not being whatever, but even for comedians and stuff like that too, like even during the pandemic, like for people when we were all getting together, because I did this, I co-produced a giant benefit show streaming thing, but for children with cancer and star treatments, which
Oh,
actually
cool.
takes children. Yeah. And it wound up breaking a Guinness World Record because it was 93 hours we streamed. So we
Wow.
barely slept, but we just kept going. But we did it with just comedians.
Yeah.
And I was making phone calls at the time because it was so early, like not early in the pandemic, but just enough into it where we realized none of us were gigging anymore,
Yeah.
that everybody wanted to see each other. And then it became this thing of like, I hope this kind of stays after
Yeah.
this ends too, because you were like, you just missed each other. So you
Yeah.
were like, there was
Yeah.
no, like, all these people came in at the same time as for a good cause. And then a lot of us were looking at each other and we were like, why don't we just like, what is it going to take to just co-headline and not fucking give a shit about, like we all make, like,
Yeah.
especially like for me and where I am in my level, like, we're like, none of us are getting famous anymore by doing the clubs. No one's coming out to the comedy store, like there's
Yeah.
no agents
Yeah.
in the audience.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? Like if,
Yeah.
as long as we're all making a living in the same, like, let's just have fun, because we didn't get to see each other. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's, lasted, but hopefully, for some
Hopefully.
people, I think it has. Yeah.
I think it would. I think it would if you were to meet anywhere. It would, because I think it's really
Yeah.
something that is age changes you in that respect. When you have
Mhm.
a perspective. First of all, when you're young and you're in the middle of the game and you're competitive and everything, you're really locked into a bubble. I mean, that bubble
Sure.
you're, I mean, I think Randy and I, being a little older than a lot of the people that we were contemporaries that were in the studios and stuff, there was sort of we had a perspective. Plus, having been teachers, I think changed our perspective on a lot of people. But you're still in that bubble. But when you get to our age, that bubbles, you see the world's a
Sure.
much bigger place, and life is a much bigger, and you're not the same person. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a nice perspective to have. What was that thing in '85 with the Live Aid when they left
Yeah.
a thing on the door for the Band-Aid song that they all did? That was like, "Leave your egos at the door" or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know who put the sign up, but I was
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, that's a nice,
Yeah.
that's pretty
Absolutely.
great."
It is
Yeah.
great. It is great. It's a really
Um,
important thing to do.
and you reminded me of that Ricky Nelson song, when you were saying that you went to the band, when you were with Pat Benatar, and you were like, oh, you looked out in the audience and like they want to hear, they're here for a specific reason, they're all here for a high school thing. But didn't Ricky Nelson have a song called like Garden Party
Yeah.
about going to
Yeah,
do the
exactly
yeah,
that. Yeah, they wanted him
isn't
to
it?
do "Hello, Mary Lou" instead of, and
Yeah,
he was
and they were
doing
pissed.
yeah, he was doing his country rock thing at the time. That's
Yeah.
so funny you should mention that, because that John Boylan was his producer at the time, doing
Oh, I didn't know that.
the country rock thing, and he had lots of wonderful stories about not only Rick Nelson, but about Harriet Nelson, his mom. They used to go over there and have cookies and milk. And John said he was sitting in Harriet Nelson's kitchen, and it was
Wow.
just like he was on TV, as Ricky's mom was selling it. Want some cookies and milk, kids?
That's amazing.
I
Yeah,
know.
I had no idea. But that's crazy. It's like, you would think, I've been to those McCartney concerts because my mom, I mean, I'm a fan too, but my mom's like a huge Beatles fan. And when he was touring for a while, she loves Paul McCartney. So I would take, like, it was around her birthday in August. So
Oh,
we would
cool.
go, but like he would kind of say, like, it'd be kind of funny because he'd be on stage and he would just kind of say, like, hey, this is new, or this is stuff, I know you came here for this, but I'm going to play,
Yeah,
so it
yeah,
was this weird acknowledgement of like, hey, look, we're going to
yeah.
be here for 2 hours. So fucking strap
Almost
in.
apologizing for my new
Yeah,
material.
yeah.
I know you
And it
don't want to
wasn't
hear
not
this, but
good. It was great. Some of
oh,
his new stuff too, I love. Like, I
oh,
just don't know how you don't,
legit, yeah, absolutely.
um, so, so you built the studio in 91,
Hmm.
85 you're touring. Um, one of the things I'd love to know is, so when you were doing, because you're obviously been talking about Oregon a lot. Oregon means a lot to you, but you got asked to to write a musical to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
Was that like, was that surreal at that time? Like, were you like 'cause one, I think when people, even for like, whenever I talk to musicians or entertainers or other comedians or anything like that, performing for their area in
Uh-huh.
particular is
Mhm.
always like not a great, like, unless they become famous and come back to it, and then they're, because even I was talking to Noel Hogan from the Cranberries,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it was like once they had gotten to the States and came back, he was like, literally they walked off the bus and they were like, "We love you," and he was like, "Fuck off." It's like, not when we were here. But this is like a huge, so was that like a surreal thing for you, or like was it cool to, because that's kind of awesome, I think.
Um, it was well, it was definitely about as far away as you could get from Quarterflash, and in
Yeah.
that respect, it was really healthy for me to do that. And the other thing is that I had gotten my teaching degree actually as a history slash English major. I was, in that era when I was graduating from college, there was
Hmm.
a thing was called ESS, English Social Studies. It's a lot of English teachers who taught English and social studies, and that's what I thought I was going to do, which I did for a while. So
Cool.
so social studies was, you had to take a whole semester of Oregon history. My father moved to Oregon when he was 6, so basically my family growing up was an Oregon family, and Rindy's family, for God's sake, her family has an Oregon Trail diary. I mean, they came back over the trail in
Oh my God,
1855.
that is so awesome.
So she has family that goes all the way back to people who literally walked the 2,000 miles across the country to get here.
Hmm.
So it was not as odd in that respect. So I'm looking for, they approached the state of Oregon. I get a call from them saying, we're looking for somebody who can put together a show that could commemorate the 150th anniversary of the trail. We're looking for someone who has experience in touring, someone who's
Hmm.
experienced producing and writing, and can put all those elements together and take a show that would appeal to all ages, which was the most challenging part of it, and is willing to travel all around the 6 states that are a part of the Oregon Trail, all the way from Missouri to Oregon. It was going to be a big
Hmm.
tour and everything. And I had just formed Ross Productions and had just finished my studio, and I wasn't writing any music at the time. I was just sort of trying to reinvent myself, and it was the first real opportunity that sounded like, wow, that's a big project, really big project. And
Hmm.
so yeah, I was actually because I was really tired of Los Angeles by then. We'd been there almost a decade. We had an apartment there for almost a decade.
Okay.
So, and the LA thing was, it was intense, and there was a certain vibe to LA that was very, very different. And coming back to Oregon was, in a way, sort of, it was wonderful. It was like it was like, let's go back to, that side of my life. So for me, it was sort of like, yeah. And I think, I wrote the musical, the first 4 or 5 songs. Four of those songs I'm really proud of. They're really good. They're moving songs. What We Left Behind, which Rindy sang on that little record we made for that project. Um, People wept when we would play that song, and it was very much it's interesting because a lot of the songwriters that I admire, and I will name two, but there's many of them. Randy Newman is one who really pulls from Stephen Foster, and Stephen Foster was the most popular. He's the first American professional songwriter. Penny for each piece of music that he sold, he made. Then he drank it all to died homeless, and he had no money, and he was an poor, sad alcoholic when he died. But he was America's first professional songwriter, and his chordal changes you'll hear in like Randy Newman songs. That diminished chords, using the 4 chord as the 5 chord, all these kind of really interesting things. The McGarrigle sisters are another band that they incorporated those chord changes from Stephen Foster, pulled them in, turned them into a pop kind of aspect to it. And so for me, that was my door. Ry Cooder does as well, and I loved Ry Cooder. So I went, okay, I can find a door into that world through Stephen Foster that will work for me as a songwriter. That is a side of me I've always wanted to explore and couldn't in Quarterflash. So that's what drew me in. And then the other thing was that when I was a kid, I loved musicals. I just did. I loved music. I love patter songs. I love the Music Man, all that stuff.
Yeah.
West Side Story, I loved all that. Officer Krupke, and again, patter songs. That word thing, lots of words used real cleverly, real fast. So that was another thing that I was going, I could do that. I could my chance to write, because they didn't really expect me to write a musical. They just wanted a show of some kind.
Sure.
And I went, okay, I want to do a musical. I want to do it with actors and a director, and I want a producer. I want lights. I want sound. I want the whole thing. If you can raise enough money, the state of Oregon, if you can do that, then I'll do it. And so they said, put a show together. They gave me a budget. It was decent, but not enough to tour. And they said, give us a show, and we'll bring all the sponsors to your show. So we did one show at a theater downtown in Portland, and the sponsors loved it. They went crazy for it. And so we got the funding from Bank America, and all these big gigantic corporate money came in.
Right.
And so we were able to do it, record the album, tour with actors, and it was first class all the way. And it was hugely successful. And everybody, I think a lot of people who were in sort of, let's say, who saw Quarterflash in a particular way, let's put it that way, or saw that Marv and Randy were, Harden My Heart, and then they saw us doing, pioneer music, I guess is what they would have called it, probably.
Yeah.
In a very demeaning way, because oh my God, what happened to them? Now look, we got some of that blowback, and it didn't bother me in the least, because
that's good.
Because by then it was sort of like, we'd been 10 years in LA. It's like you're going to, if you're going to tag me, go ahead. I don't care. We got, and then it was just sort of a serendipity thing. I had a close friend who started a not-for-profit called Friends of the Children, which is a wonderful organization. They're all over the country now. And they take kids who are high-risk youth kids, and they provide opportunities for them and mentors. They have a mentor that stays with them from the time that they're, and usually around first grade is when these kids are identified as they're going to be on a bad road. Their parents, something's wrong at home, and we're already getting signs in first grade and kindergarten that these kids are going to go off the skids,
Right.
And they take these kids and they assign them a friend, and then that friend stays with the friend till they're out of high school, which is amazing.
Wow.
It's like having another parent, right?
Yeah, seriously.
So Friends of the Children was just starting, literally. And the guy said, well, I'm looking for something to raise money. And I said, I got this great band. The commemoration for the Oregon Trail is done. Mm-hmm. Let's find out something we can do. And I came up with the idea of doing a Christmas show at this beautiful theater called the Aladdin Theater. The old-fashioned restored theater, just gorgeous, 700-seater. And so, so we put the show on there with this band. Got out of the pioneer. The first year we said we're going to do it like it was, as if it was 1850 and you went to a Christmas show. And we did that. It was a little too slow, so we kept modifying it. The band was extremely talented. Classical musicians, jazz musicians, folk musicians were all. Baroque musicians were all in there together in this band, and 9 pieces, at sometimes 8 pieces other times. And Randy joined the band. And it caught on. It was just huge. And it just, we ended up doing 100 sold out performances in that theater. We raised $1 million for Friends of the Children over the course of those years.
Sure.
Yeah, and we put out 13 records, most of them Christmas records, because that's what people were selling, and Friends of the Children was getting a piece of the albums as well. And so
That's awesome.
it was a great run, and we retired that in 2018. We did our last Christmas show, but
Wow.
I'm very proud of that work. And
Yeah.
a lot of the songs I wrote in that were some really good songs, very, very different than Quarterflash, and a lot of them musicals. But that also got me involved in writing musicals. That success of that, and I got the bug. And then I had a Native American actor in the Oregon Trail story, and he on the tour bus was listening to Native American music, and he had on headphones. Everybody had headphones in the bus, you know how you are.
Yeah.
Well, he says, "Check this out," and he handed me his headphones, and I started listening to this Native music, which I'd never listened to. And he wasn't a singer; he was an actor. So the first time I really listened to Native music, and I go, "Who's ever singing? This is amazing shit." And he said, "I'm challenging you, white dude, to write a musical with native actors and singers and stuff." And it was like, wow, it really. Now my mom had been raised on the Flathead Res in Montana, so as a kid, my mom wasn't native, but she was raised on the res, and so she had friends who were native, and she taught us kids, the three of us siblings, to respect Native American culture and encouraged it. So even though I didn't have any kind of grounding in education in Native American art, I had I guess you'd say I was open to the idea, and it was interested in me. And that's how I ended up writing the second musical, which was a 10-year project that I'm very proud of, that was a huge success, and it had 16 Native American actors and singers and dancers in it. And it was, that was a powerful experience. So that's so involved. It's possible to go into it, but I'll just say the Ghost of Celilo. Celilo was an ancient fishing ground that was buried by a dam on the Columbia River. It sadly disappeared, and it was a gorgeous place, and where all the native people came from far away as Montana to fish at. Beautiful, 30-pound salmon they were catching in nets, dip nets off rickety platforms.
Wow.
So it was an extremely picturesque place that sadly was the Army Corps of Engineers buried with water when they built the dam, and it had been 50 years since it had been inundated, and that was the reason for the play, was to say this happened, and this was shitty, and these people are still feels like yesterday to them that their land was lost.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a powerful piece.
You'll be happy to know, because I know you're not online at all. Like, you don't have any Facebook or Instagram or anything like that.
I have Facebook. Yeah.
You have Facebook. Okay. Yeah, well, we'll become Facebook friends. But this is more like a TikTok, Instagram, real thing. There's a trend right now for what everybody kind of calls as sad cowboy music.
Oh yeah.
And it's really like it's I mean, obviously people who love it. Like I would listen to that shit all day long. But it really has become like people are kind of using it in their Instagram reels and their videos, because they'll find and hitch onto these songs that people make. So it's becoming almost the same way like synth is like, inching its way back into music.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of these new bands and stuff that are coming out, and they're creating all this kind of Western. I don't know. There's like a vibe of like wanting to go. I think because technology is so in everyone's faces, there's like this thing of like, I just want to sit on a cactus and not on a cactus, but what
is it like? Is it reminiscent of Sons of the who would be Sons of the Pioneers style?
Yeah. I was gonna say, there's a lot of good vibes like that. So like, I don't know if you're like, maybe bringing some of that stuff back, but it kind of, when I was reading this, checking all this stuff out, I was like, oh man, yeah, that's like right up his alley, I think.
One of the great things that we did with the Trail Band is that was certainly that was sort of the fun and kind of non-historic element of the Trail Band, was that we could do that kind of stuff, because we could do those harmonies, and we had incredible banjo fiddle players,
Love the
fiddle.
So
it was, so in Portland we had our own singing cowboy cartoon show guy for years, named Heck Harper. And Heck dressed in the full, nudie Western outfit with the wagon wheels and the whole thing, and every day he'd host a kiddie show, and kids, and I was one of the kids that were on, millions of us probably that were on his show over the course of the the 50s and the 60s and the 70s.
Right.
And we just before I had heard he was getting close to passing, that he was ill. So, and he was in his 70s. I called him and said, "Would you like to, say goodbye to Portland in a sold out, theater with them, and we'll back you up, the best musicians in town, to do."
Wow.
And so he came back on and did, did the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, and he was weak, but he did great, and it was a really powerful experience. And we did like Sons of the Pioneers kind of stuff. We did some Christmas songs in that style, and then we did other songs that weren't. But yeah, that I can see what I mean. I always, my dad loved that kind of music. I mean, Sons of the Pioneers was something I heard a lot as a kid, and country western was. Well, Heck Harper, not only did he have a kids show, he had his own show because he had his own band, Western band, and anybody that came through town in Portland in the 50s and 60s would go on his show to promote their concerts. So he played, he backed up Johnny Cash and people like that.
Wow.
Yeah. Fascinating.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love all that music. That's my quiet time music.
That's cool. No, it's great stuff.
Great.
Yeah, I love that music.
There's a part of your life too. You went back to get a master's degree in mental health.
Rindy did, yeah.
Rindy went back to get
it.
Oh,
she
okay.
Did. Yeah. She right when we got back from LA, we said we'd keep Quarterflash going, but not touring anymore. So we're talking about just doing gigs, Portland, Seattle, things like that, really close to us. So that got her, but she didn't want to just be doing that once every 2 weeks or once a week or something. She wanted to do more, and she's brilliant. And she went back she went back and said, you know what, I'm going to go back to school. And I was like, wow, that's great. So she went back and she decided that she wanted to go into mental health counseling. I mean, she's really.
Do you know why she? Was there anything that's, because I was going to ask if there was anything that set you off for doing it, but I didn't realize, for some reason I didn't realize it was Rindy that went and did it. Is there because I that's something near and dear to me. I mean, everybody kind of, I've dealt with levels of depression, and just recently again too. And 2023 was a really hard year, like a really weird, like, I mean, there was other years that were hard too, but like this one felt in a different way. But because I had done a short film before the pandemic hit that was like actually Henson's company picked up on before everything went on pause, and now I don't know where we are with it, but which is a bummer, which is like a real,
no kidding, yeah.
I was that would have been nice. But I did this thing because I'd come up with an idea called Duppet, and originally I don't know if my manager told me about this, but anyway, originally it was basically going to be like, because I always describe depression as living with a shitty roommate that just constantly is just telling you the worst shit. And then when I wanted to film it, when I've written it, I was like, oh, it's going to be we had no money. So I was like, it's going to be really hard to get somebody else that kind of looks like me, but not. And then I'm like, and then to have it be like, he's not really there. But I love the Muppets. I'm a huge Muppets fan. I love Jim Henson and all that shit. So I had a dumb puppet. And then I had a buddy of mine who was really good at puppeteering and rework it to look like me. Long story short, basically the whole thing is about how this dude's depression manifests itself into a puppet that he winds up calling his Duppet. So it's a depression puppet.
Oh,
and
like that. Cool.
Yeah, and it follows him around and is very negative and always kind of reminding him of shit. But it kind of like, I've kind of, tried to take a dive into that world because it is interesting, and it's hard to, I've had other, people on who are prepared. Like I had I don't know if you know Dr. Edward Hollowell, who's he's great. He's I discovered him over the pandemic too, because he started making videos when he his practice was being virtual or whatever, but he'd written a bunch of books about ADHD and neurodivergent behavior. And he's also talks about depression, and it's just the connectivity between all that stuff. So it was just I was just curious, because performers, I feel like we are prone to that in such a huge way.
We are.
And also prone to have, I've never been diagnosed with it, but it's funny. I had him on the show, and he goes, "You have it." He's like, just 30 seconds into this, I'm like, okay, well, and I don't deny it, but it is one of those things where like you develop coping mechanisms when you're not aware that you have it. So
Sure.
you either wind up on one or the other. But I was fascinated by how closely it was connected with depression and all that other stuff too. So it's just interesting, fascinating to me.
It is fascinating, and I think that our experience going through 10 years sort of in the LA scene, I think when Rennie came back, I think there was definitely, I'm not sure she would have gone that direction had she not gone through that experience, because it does,
Mm.
we haven't talked about that much, John, but obviously there's a lot of challenges with the kind of spotlight you get put under. For I mean, obviously we didn't
Sure.
have like a gigantic career like Elton John or something, but you really was definitely under the microscope, because she was the lead singer, and so when there were interviews, when people would request interviews for the band, Rindy always carried the weight by far compared to the rest of us in the band.
Right.
And there was a lot of pressure for her to be, whatever, from different people,
Sure.
from the label, from management, from just everybody. So I think that there was a lot of self introspection on her part and my part too. But I think that's what got her kind of leaning in that direction, as opposed to just being a teacher. Is like,
Right.
how can I help people now that I've been through something that's fairly traumatic in a way? I mean, everybody assumes it's nothing but a positive experience, when you go through
Right.
something like that. But there's a lot of shit that happens that really you going to the deep part of yourself when you take on something as big as being a national television
Yeah.
person, or whatever it is you want to call us. But but I admire her tremendously, because she's Rennie's just an exceptional human being, but she's gotten like one B in her life, and she all A. So she went through
Wow.
at the top of her class, of course, and got her
Sure.
master's
Sure.
degree. And Sisters of Providence hired her immediately to do work for
Oh,
them. So she worked for, I think, 17 years for Providence before she retired, and they loved her. And she was, she's just good at what she's a wonderful listener, which is a really rare thing in in people who tend to be that talented and beautiful. But
right.
so it's she's obviously, I think I admire her so much for going back and doing that.
Yeah. That's immediately when I saw that, I was really curious about it, because I always, at first I was like, yeah, there's no way. Like, it makes total. It's a wonder that people who are in this don't normally gravitate towards that, just to try to figure some of the shit that you have to go through on any level out. Like, just on, like, because as soon as you were saying about the LA stuff too, I kept thinking of it in the back of my mind, that I wanted to bring it up too, because like, for me, when I moved out to LA, and I obviously moved back, but it was not I mean, I had fun, and I was doing this rush of like network meetings when I first got out there, but no one tells you that, like, in between not doing any of that, you just feel like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and because it's this super, super high and then a real low, and plus it's always sunny and everybody's gorgeous. So you're like, where am I? Like, you know what I mean? They're like, well, I don't belong here at all. I'm trash. So yeah, it's just even going back there, when I just have to go back, like, now I still have this thing in the back of my head of like, it was not a good time.
Yeah.
Like, when I was there. So it's just, I can only imagine, like, having to deal with all that stuff.
We
But that's awesome.
only went back once in all those years. We only went back once, and that was that was to see John Boylan. So
yeah. I totally envy that, and it's funny too, because my even my manager will be like, "You should come out to LA," and I'm like, "Not unless I absolutely have, like, you got to keep me busy from the moment I'm there until I leave, so I don't know I'm there."
Yeah.
Because it's whatever, and I feel bad because I should like it, but I find it very something about it.
Yeah.
I should definitely like it. I like everything outside. I like the desert. I like all that stuff.
Yeah.
I used to live in Arizona.
Sure.
I like driving through that. I like San Clemente is nice.
Yeah. Marina Del Rey or whatever. Those it's beautiful. Yeah. It's gorgeous. But it's
every now and then I'll try to stalk Dick Van Dyke. That's fun. I never found him, but I know he's in Malibu somewhere. One day. That's what I do. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to plug and stuff before we? Because I know in 2022, you told me that like you're doing another album, or you did another album, Bent Not Broken.
Yeah.
But then, so are you doing it? You want me to plug anything for you? Or what's coming up? Or?
Well, I think if people would check out, I think that some of the, of course, we all have our own opinion of ourselves. It may not, reflect what anybody else thinks. But I felt like, one of the fascinating things for me was that when Quarterflash was we knew we were wrapping things up. And that's when the lead guitar player of Quarterflash, his name is Doug Frazier, phenomenal guitar player, wonderful human being. He had played in a band with John Kuntz. Now, John Kuntz was signed to A&M, and they did an album called Let It Rock. They had 2 albums on A&M in the 80s. Wow. They never hit it, but they were an amazing band. And John is an amazing, incredible writer, singer, guitar player, drummer. Anyway, John was sort of like, he was kind of like going, well, I'm not sure what, now we're in our 60s, what do we do with our lives, kind of thing. And Doug said, why don't you've written so many great songs that don't really fit Randy's voice, because I always shared stuff with Doug and played stuff for him. And in fact, I had a young singer sing some of my material, but it wasn't working out quite well. He was too young to really grasp the gravity of those songs. But Doug said, why don't you work with John? I said, John, why would John work with me? John had a great career and everything. And I was sort of like, but John was ready to do something where he didn't write the material, which was interesting because he was a great writer. And Doug said, why don't you take these songs and let's see if John would be able to sing them. So we went in. Doug has a small studio, so we went to his studio and we recorded 4 songs, and it just was like, holy crap, this is good. It was like, so something about John's voice that was, for whatever reason, because I've been writing from a woman's perspective with rare exceptions for 50 years. I met Randy in high school. I started writing for her, within a year or 2. So it was almost like there was all this sort of, I guess, masculine testosterone, or at least just a perspective that was male, that wasn't female for me. Right. That all of a sudden this shit poured out of me that was really powerful. And so New American Blues was my take on. I ride my bike a lot, and so the path that I ride, it's a bike path that goes 20 miles east of Portland. And all the homeless camps are there because it's an old railroad track that they covered with asphalt, and so it's a place where they can all just live, So I used to ride my bike past these, 1,500 camps alone. I don't know how many, so maybe 3,000 homeless people living out there. Wow. And I would ride out there and back, every other day, and I would stop and talk to them and stuff. So I got real interested in that culture, the sadness of it, the humor of it, the anger of it, all the shit that happens in those worlds. And I wrote this song called New American Blues. To me, that was sort of like this was a whole new culture that was coming up that had its own entity that was a reflection of a failure of American dream, Right. And so I wrote this song, New American Blues, and John sang it, and that was the first one I think we did, and it was like, oh my God, that's so good. John just
it is good, very, very good.
Yeah, and then we did the other one which caught on and was fire. We did the videos with John, and I Won't Sing Here Anymore. So that record. Then we did the second album was based. John was a writer now. He's not writing songs. He's just writing books. And just self-publishing, but they're beautiful little books about his growing up in the South. And so after I finished the first album, which were all sort of my perspective of things that was going on in my head, like the homeless situation and the church stuff and all that stuff that was going on. I said, John, I'm out of ideas, but can I use your books to write the second album? I'll just take your ideas and take them in and turn them into songs. And so that's the second album is all about the South. And then, so if you like Americana rock and roll, that's how I would describe it. It fits very much you can hear John Fogerty, you can hear Springsteen, you can hear a little bit of John Prine, you can hear, if that's your genre, if I was going to do a plug, you're going to, New American Blues and Bent Not Broken, you're going to love those records. And we'd love to sell them to people. And, I have a box of them here. I don't expect to sell millions of copies or anything, but there's such good music, and very good. Somebody should be listening to it, I guess is what I'm saying. And if they want to check it out, you can go on YouTube and just type in Kuntz Ross Frazier, and then you'll get
awesome.
pop right up, and people can check out the music and they can order it. That'd be great.
Great, and thanks for sharing it with me, man. I really appreciate that.
No,
too.
well, thanks you for letting me share it. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you the same 3 questions I ask every guest that's been on the show.
Okay.
So, first one's a bit of a softball question, but if you can go back in time and talk to your younger self, what piece of advice would you give yourself that would help you today?
Don't worry so much about everything.
Okay, I love that. That is
I am a worrier, and I carry,
Mhm.
and I especially, in those LA years, I worried about everything, every little thing, and it was just a waste of fucking time. I don't know that I had the ability at that time to not worry about it.
Right.
Apparently, I didn't. Because I think I probably would have tried. I think I was trying. I wasn't trying hard enough, or I wasn't trying in the right direction. But
Right.
that's what I would have told myself. And it's kind of funny because, before my mom passed, that's what she said to me. She said, "Stop worrying about stuff so much." And
Very sweet.
Yeah.
Second question is, what had to end in your life, good or bad, that led you to where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I think it would be that not searching for a record label, a national record label, was a huge letting go for me in 1989, and moving back to Portland and giving up our apartment in LA. I started writing much better when I got home. Much better. I was right. My songs were. I was trying to keep the Quarterflash thing going, and but making it grow a little bit here and there. But I wasn't taking wild leaps and writing about the Oregon Trail, or writing about from a male perspective, or all the things that I did almost immediately when I got home was almost like casting off this gigantic shell of like a turtle shell. I got it off, and I'll go look for a new shell to crawl into, because
Yeah.
I felt like I was being burdened, and wasn't even aware of how much I was burdened. But once I got out of that scene, my creativity exploded.
That's great, man. That's awesome. And the last question, it ties into the show. So if this is a genuine dystopia, more so than it might be now, however you're feeling, if it feels like it. But what would be, what do you think would be happening? Like, you wake up
Uh-huh.
and it's the end of the world for everybody. You know it. You got 24 hours left. What do you think would be what do you think is going to be the cause? You think it's going to be global warming, comet heading toward Earth, aliens, zombies, political collapse, like whatever it is? And how would you want to go out? What's going to be your epic death? Like, what are you going to be doing that day?
Oh my God, that is a really hard question. Oh my
That's
God,
a tough one.
what's going to be the cause?
Wow. And what
Oh
are you going to be doing?
man, I think. Well, I mean, obviously, global warming is going to be a slow death by 1,000 cuts. So
Dude, right?
I don't think that's going to be happening overnight. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's gonna eat us up slowly. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And we're going to keep adjusting, and it's going to get worse. We're going to keep adjusting worse, and we're just going to normalize it as it go. As the world turns into an absolute hell, hell will be normalized by the time it finally ends. We'll go, oh, this isn't so bad. This isn't so bad,
That is so fucking true. I love that you said that. Hell is going to be normalized. Maybe I'll title the episode that. That's a fucking, make it a song, man. That's hilarious.
Well, I think if it's going to be an instantaneous thing, then it's got to be a comet hitting the planet. And in my last 24 hours, of course, I take my dog and Rindy, and we all just lay on the bed together and hug each other and let it happen. That's
nice.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. But I've had some people, they're like, I'm gonna do all the coke. And I'm like, oh, all right. Like,
well, I can still do that in bed, I guess, if I wanted to.
Yeah, that's right. You could. Yeah. What do you? Don't limit yourself. My fear is that I wind up doing something like that and it doesn't happen, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
16 cheeseburgers in and just cook, the whole thing, and I'm like, wow, so this didn't happen. Oh, that's great. It was great having you on and talking to you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, John. I totally enjoyed it, and good luck with all of your endeavors too. Man, you just sound like you're really busy, and send me stuff. Let's be friends on Friendbook. Send me a request.
Yeah,
and
I will. I'll send you a request. I'll email you some stuff. Yeah.